I think they'll probably shul probably have a seal on Sunday.
There's one in town tonight. Oh, that's it.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be a big one.
It's a big one. You see something going on there and everything. The animal, the bear, look, he had a whole convention.
I did not know that.
The animal, he had his bears with the smoke coming up.
Okay, Zok the Helevi Gemara. We are up to Yidkuf test. Today's Kuf Chof, right? Okay, we're up about Kuf Chof, and if I'm not mistaken, we got a little bit on, no? No, we're at the bottom of Kuf test on the base, yeah. No. Zok the Helevi Gemara. We have to go a little bit back. We had the halacha of Rabbi Bar Chama. We had two lashonos of Rabbi Bar Chama, and I was struggling yesterday to know where the girsa came from. It actually isn't the Haggadah. It is the Shita's girsa. I don't know why I didn't notice it earlier. So we'll just quickly run through. Zok the Heilige Gemara. I'm in Ois test in the Shita Mikubetes, which basically overhauls the entire nusach of our Gemara. It says as follows: that we say that on the Bama Gedola, you have to separate between the damim that are above the Chut HaSikra and the damim that are below the Chut HaSikra. Ela b'kotzei Bama Gedola. That's only for karbonos that are designated for the Bama Gedola, like karbonos of Tzibur. The krivu b'Bama Gedola, and if you mark those karbonos that have to be on the Bama Gedola, then you have the restrictions of where the dam has to be spritzed. Ava b'kotzei Bama Ketara. What if it was a standard Olas Nadava that you really could have brought on the Bama Katana? And for some reason, the Karvinu Bama Gedola, you decided to be Makrivid on the Bama Gedola, there ain't Chitzui. It still doesn't matter whether you spritz the blood on the top half of the Mizbech or on the bottom half of the Mizbech. And on that, most of Rabbah, Chazer B'Shoik, Utrumas Lach V'Toida, Nehagim B'Bama Gedola, Ve'Nehagim B'Bama Katana. So this brisa seems to say very strictly that when you're being makriv in the Bama Gedola, you conform with all the rules of the Bama Gedola, even if it's a korban that could normally be brought on the Bama Ketana. Let's amend the brisa and say that the brisa doesn't say noihagin b'Bama Gedola. The brisa really says noihagin b'koche Bama Gedola, noihagin b'koche Bama Ketana. Ikodamri, there is another way that Rabbi Bachama was quoted. You know when there's rules of Bama Gedola? That's at the time where only a Bama Gedola was allowed and not a Bama Ketana. Such as when Shiloh was standing, Bisman Bama Ketana, but during, let's say, the period of Noy Givon, where it was permitted to have a Bama Ketana, then even in the Bama Gedola, we don't have to stick to the rules. And here Rabbi asked, most of Rabbi Chazer B'Shoik, Trumas Lach V'Toida, clearly it's mashma that it's speaking in a period of time where both were relevant, yet the rules do apply by the Bama Gedola. And for the Gemara, Eimen Nehagin Bisman Bama Gedola, Nehagin Bisman Ketana. And this Rabbi Bechama, when we say this Rabbi Bechama, we mean inside the first lashon of Rabbi Bechama. Inside the second lashon of Rabbi Bechama, Upligi de Rabbi Lazar, that will be inconsistent with the sheet of Rabbi Lazar, because what is Rabbi Lazar saying? Now we can go back into the Gemara. The bottom line of Kof Yitoshen Beis, Olas Bamas Yachid Shechnisa B'Fnim. If you had an Olas Bamas Yachid, which is exactly the subject matter that Rabbi Bechama was referring to, and for some reason you decided that you wanted to be makriv on the Bama Gedola, so you brought it to, let's say, Noy V'Givon. It's considered a korban of the Bama Gedola, and it follows all the halachas of Bama Gedola. This contradicts both lashonos of Rabbi Bechama, and therefore it disargues on Rabbi Lazar. Okay. Let's just quickly, we did it yesterday, but quickly learn Rashi on Rabbi Lazar, which happens to be physically on the top of Daf Kuf Chaf Amar Aleph. Rashi says, Technisa, Gorash b'divlei with Rebbe Lozer. That's how we're gorash in the words of Rebbe Lozer. Shechnisa la'achar sheshachta b'chutz. Even if you shechted this carbon oilus nadava b'chutz, then you brought the shechted animal into the azara, into Novi Givod, called Tua Mechitzos L'chol Dover. We say that now it has the full halachas of an animal on a Bama Gedola. That's how we're garish this B'Rayis B'Mesechus Mila. Alma av kachim shenishchetu the Bama Ketana shekrivan b'Gedola Kol din Bama Gedola noeg b'hen, and that's not like Rabbi Barchava. Ushma'ina mina nami de b'shas heter Bama nami lo nishtana din Gedola mehil chasa. Ushteina l'shonis to Rabbi Barchava palag ad Rabbi Lozer. Both l'shonis of Rabbi Barchava would be disputing Rabbi Lozer. Gewaltig. Now let's have a look at the next shayla. Very observed, back down to the bottom of Kufi Testament base. Very observed. What about Oilas Bama Yachid? You had a carbon oila that was shechted outside to be wrapped on the Bama Yachid, and then Shechnisa Lefnim, it was brought in, where Rabbi Lozer says that the mechitzas are koiled it, but then Veitzia Lechutz. Now you took it back out. Do you say keeping the ayla koltola mechitzta? Once it was brought in, so now it has the status of a carbon that belongs dafke on the mizbeach in the Beis Hamikdash or in the Yivin. Idilma keeping the hadar. Or you say no. Once it was taken out, it was taken out. Let's see Rashi. Shech nizalafnim achar sheshachta b'chutz. It was shechted b'chutz. The chazer v'aitzia, and it was taken out again. Ma'u mino ba din kachay bama gedola legabi waralachos litoin betrumas chazer b'shoik. If it was a shlomim, would you need to separate the chazer b'shoik? A and B is v'tzarch lachsir b'fnim, and you also have to now bring it back inside to be makavir on the mizbech hapnim. That was the shayla. Zok to Gemara lav hainu. Plukta the Rabbi of Yosef, wouldn't this be a machlokes that we have already discussed, which is between Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi? The Tanan we learned, Kochi Kochim, Sheshachton Bedarim. What happens if you shechted an oila or a chatos not on the tzafon side of the mizbeach, where you were supposed to shecht it, but you shechted it Bedarim? So the halacha is, does it become a carbon? Which eventually, once you make shrikas dam, you no longer moral. It says more alan behind you moral. Let's hear what Rashi says. The nan kochim kochim v'loy garsinam de itmar v'loy garsinam im olu lo yerdu, because those words will come in a moment. Umishnehi b'meseches mila more alan behind you're moral if you shechted kochim kochim b'darim instead of b'tzafin. V'loy amrinon kiman de chankinon dami. You don't say that if it was shechted in the wrong place, we look at it as if it was killed and it becomes an avela and it's not really a carbon. And therefore, we treat it like a carbon that died before you shechted it. Oh, you're not moiled anymore because it becomes ois carbon. So not like what I said. Once it becomes ois carbon, there would be no din me'ilah, ki detanya b'meseches me'ilah. So this is how we're going to this sugya Maseches Me'ilah, and now we're going to leave the words of the Gemara and we're going to go into Rashi, because Rashi is goyish once again differently than the words of our Gemara. Lav hanyu de Rabbi Rabbi Yosef. Isn't that the machlokes of Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef? That nan kochi kochim sheshachtim b'darim me'alin bahem yomel v'yiberu, and there was a shayla in Maseches Me'ilah about this brisa, about this Mishnah. Olu ma'ashe yerdu. Now that this was shechted in the wrong place, and halacha is yomel, so it's still a carbon, but lemais it's a carbon that never had a shasa kosher because it was already shechted in the wrong position. If you place the meat on the mizbeach, do you leave it there or do you take it off? Rabbi Omar yerdu, it's ois carbon, and therefore it's not psula b'kodesh. It's psula before it became kodesh. Therefore, if a murim are placed on the mizbeach, you take it off. Rabbi Yosef Omer im olu lo yerd. And Rashi explained, Rabba Omar Yerdu, you know why? This is not similar to other psulim where you say Alul Yerdu, because they became possible after the carbon was a carbon. But since here you never shechted it properly, rather elakaman dechamkinan dami, as if you choked this animal to death, it's not even a carbon. That's Rabba's opinion. Alma, you see from here, le Rabba loy amrinon kol. You already brought it in to the Azara. You don't say once it's in there, it has its Shem Kedushas carbon, and therefore, even though the Shechita wasn't good, we say Olo Yerdu. Rather, say Olo Yerdu. So clearly, the borders of the Azara do not correlate anything that's brought into it. And the Rabbi Yosef who holds him Olo Lo Yerdu, Amin and Kolet. So that's the Shaila that the Gemara wants to offer up. Zog to Gemara, it's still a Shaila Tiboy le Rabba or Tiboy le Rabbi Yosef. You still have a Shaila according to Sai Rabba and Sai Rabbi Yosef. And let's see why. Tiboy le Rabba. At kan lo kama Rabba elo b'mizbech de chazi le mekadesh, de le chazi le mekadesh. We're talking, by Rabba, we're talking about whether or not it's Rei the Mizbech. The Mizbech is mekadesh, the Mizbech is koilet, imol lo yerdu, something that's Rei the Mizbech. But something that's not Rei the Mizbech, there and only there does Rabba say that the Mizbech won't be koilet, and therefore im olu yerdu, as Rabba says. As Rashi says, the Lei Chazulei, Lei Mekadesh, the Tanya Beperek HaMizbech Mekadesh, which we learned, Mitoich Shenemar Kol HaNoigea BeMizbech Yiktosh, Shemani Outing, Bein Royu, if it belongs on the Mizbech, Bein Sheina Royu, Talmud Lomer Ola. That the things that are Royu the Mizbech is the Mizbech Kolet. But the honey that was shechted, B'doraim, Lav Royu Ninu, Rabbi doesn't consider that Royu. To the Rabba command the Chankin and Dome, it's as if the animal was not shechted, it was shechted. Ava Mechitza, but our Shaila, when you have a carbon that was shechted in the Bama Kitana outside of the Azara, and then you brought it in, we're not talking about the Mizbeach being koilet, we're talking about the Mechitza of the Azara being koilet. Maybe Afal Gab de Leichaza Leikalta. Who said that the halachas of Klita of the Azara are governed by the same set of rules as the halachas klita of the mizbeach, and maybe it would be kodesh. So maybe Rabbi would hold that if basar from a carbon of bama katana came into bama gvoila, maybe he also would be kodesh. Or you could say afil Rabbi Yosef, who held that the mizbeach was kodesh, akan lekam Rabbi Yosef hashem elo dechad mokanu. Yes, it was shachted b'darim, but it's still in the Azara, as Rashi says. It's two different places. These karbonos are from two different universes. Maybe late. Maybe Rabbi Yossi would hold even there. Maybe Rabbi Yossi would hold over there that it's not kodesh. So therefore, the Gemara is saying that our shaila is not a machlokes Rabbi Yosef and Rabba, because no matter what opinion they express, the klitas hamizbeach, it might not be relevant to the klita of the Bama Gedola. Zok the Gemara, most of the pshita le Rabba b'chad gisa, Rabbi Yosef b'chad gisa. I'm going to pick a different case where it won't even be a suffer to Rabbi Yosef and Rabba. They'll for sure agree. They'll for sure agree to disagree. They'll each take opposite opinions. However, we're going to find that Rabbi Yamai has it as a shaila. So most of the pshita of the Rabba b'chad gisa, Rabbi Yosef b'chad gisa. So it'll be partial to Rabba that it's not kodesh. It'll be partial to Rabbi Yosef that it is kodesh. Mi b'egel Rabbi Yamai in this particular shaila that we're about to present will be a suffix to Rabbi Yamai. The Rabbi Yamai, a very oilas bamas yachid she'olu lemizbeach. The ivarim of an oilas bamas yachid. So far, the same shaila that we've been discussing. All of them is back that was taken off to the Mizbeach, the Yordu, and then they were taken off. Now, there's one massive piece of information that's the gay tipshot of this Gemara that's missing from the words of the Gemara. And Rashi doesn't even say it clearly either. Mephor shouldn't tell us that this is what it has to say there. Let's see if we could find it anywhere. let me see if I can find any hint to it in Rashi. The boy of Yamai, a very olas bamas yachid she'olul mizbeach ma'u sheyerdu. Let's see if the yud says anything. I didn't find anything, and the Shita even sticks in more than that. Not only was it shechted, but there's also zrikadan. A very olas shenishchada v'nizrika bamas yachid, and then it came in ma'u sheyerdu. But what it really means is it became Tamei inside the Azara. So the very important point that it doesn't mention here, but it's mentioned, I believe, in other places, is that it became Tamei. So Nachamo, the boy of Rama, a very olas abamis yochid, she'olu l'mizbeach, and it was in the Azara by the Mizbeach, and it became Tamei. V'yardu, and now it left the Azara. Mahu, what is the halacha? And again, if you look at the base, this part is also taken away. Rashi is not cursed, and the Rashi stops right here. And the shaila over here is that here, according to Rabbah, this was never royal mizbeach. Why? Because it was shechted chutz lazar, it was shechted by a b'makatana, and now also it's possible to go on to the mizbeach. Why? Because it became Tamei in the Azara. So there Rabbah would for sure hold im olu yerdu, and it's not kodet. Rabbi Yosy, on the other hand, holds that holds that even if it's possible, the mizbeach will be kodet. And in that area, Rabbi Yamai is a suffix whether or not it would be kodet or not. Okay, gewaltig. Zog the Gemara weiter. And the Gemara remains in the table. Itmar, Shchitas Laila b'Bamas Yachid. We know Shchita at night is a Shchita Psula in the Beis HaMikdash. You have to check Karbanos by day. But what about by a Bamas Yachid? Would that be a problem? And again, we have to look at Rashi to get the right girsa. Itmar, Olas Bamas Yachid Sheshachta B'Laila. Rav Omer Kosher. Rav holds that would be a Kosher Shchita. Shmuel Omer Posel, it will be a Posel Shchita. The Kamivlagi Baha, the Rabbi Rozer, they're arguing in this shtickle that Rabbi Rozer said because he had a steer. Rami, Ksiv, Goylu, Eli, Hayoim, Even Gedoyla. So the Pasuk says, to Rabbi Rozer, Rami Koyadoli, Ksiv, Hayomer, Begaditem, Golu, Eli, Hayoim, Even Gedoyla. So let's see where this Pasuk is. So if we look at the Torah, it brings down from Shmuel. What happened was they were fighting a war with the Pelishtim, and they were eating meat that was kosher out of the Azar. So Shaul wanted to put a stop to it. So he said right away, but God to tell me you're doing something wrong. Let's bring him his bech. Let's roll out of his bech right into the field where we are, and let's shech there. But it says Galu Ele Hayoim Even Gedola, which would indicate that Shaul HaMelech, even for his Brahma Katana, because this was not in the Beis HaMikdash, this was on the battlefield, it's mashma that shchita has to happen by day. As Rashi says, Ba'oicher Yoim Alma Delaila Psula B'Brahma Katana. You see that it's possible to shech B'Brahma Katana because Shaul was makbid, it should be done dafka by day. But also in Brahma Katana Havoy, that was a Brahma Katana. Shaul HaMelech, how you wait for Machei Pelishtim, they're in the middle of the Melchama. Uchsiv Sefer Dekra by Agishu Kol Ha'am Shayrei B'Yadei Halayla. But the next pasuk says, "Vayomer Shaul Putzu Ba'am," spread out amongst the nation. Let everybody know. V'Martamem Hagishu Elai Ish Shayrei V'ish Shayrei. All these people who have these animals that they were miyached as korbanos, bring them here. V'Shachattin Bazeh. We'll shut it on the Mizbeach, the way it's supposed to be done, and then then you'll be able to eat the meat properly, and it won't be in the Avera to eat it before the Zrikas Adam. So what happened? ויגישו כל העם איש שרואה בידי הלילה וישחטו שם. So clearly they did the shchita on the Baba Katana by night. Zok to Gemara, Mar Mishani, one answers, Kan Bekoche, Kan Bechulin, Kan Bekochim, one was Chulin, one was Kochim, meaning Avada Kochim in the Baba Katana in Al Shach, but not on the animals that they had Bekochim, some of them were just Chulin animals. So that Mandamar hold that if you shechted by night, even though Baba Katana it would be possible. So who is that Mandamar? That's Shmuel. Umar Mishani can bekochi Baba Gedola, can bekochi Baba Katana, and that will be Rav who holds that you allow to shecht in the Baba Katana at night. You're allowed, I guess you are, because they shechted it all. Well, they didn't shecht it on the Bama. They shechted it around the Bama. They didn't. I don't think they were makavit. It's chul. Why would they be makavit? Let's see Rashi. Kan bekochi Baba Gedola, shehok teshuli karev the Baba Gedola. When they were maknish, they made up that they're going to do it on the Baba Gedola. The Avagab that Kervin the Baba Katana, I guess he made a Shah. Nevertheless, but in the end, it would have to be done by day. Kan bekochi Baba Katana, harbu belayla. Ushumon Shana, you have to say v'yoyim akochim koi v'afilu bekochi Baba Katana v'inon yoyim. Hadach said Laila is bechul. Okay, gewaltig. Itmar, Olas Bamas Yochid. You have an Ola that belongs to the Bamas Yochid. Rav Amar ain't to una have shit v'nituach. It doesn't have the halachas of an Ola where you have to skin it and then cut it into pieces. Rabbi Yochanan Amar to una have shit v'nituach. It does have that requirement. They'll be arguing in Rabbi Yosy Eglu's halacha. This is already what Yosy remembers when he made a see him. He started from here. The time we learned, Rabbi Yosy Eglu labor. Oila shekrivu Yisrael b'midbar. This oila, if you remember, we discussed the carbon oila that was brought by Matan Torah. Remember, we had a shaila. The Gemara ended up saying the shaila was if the pratim were said b'Sinai, meaning that even the oila needs nituach, or only the klalim were said b'Sinai, but there was no halacha yet that an oila needs hefshet v'nituach. So this oila shekrivu Yisrael b'midbar ain't tuna hefshet v'nituach. Why? Shein hefshet v'nituach elam oil moed ve'elach. That is what Rabbi Yosy said, because he holds that the pratim were not said in Sinai, only the klalim. So we knew about the carbon oil, but we didn't know the exact details of how the carbon oil is processed. So based on Rabbi Yosy, you have a machlekes over here. You can have Rabbi Yochanan. Masaber me'oil moed ve'elach. Once we got the pratim, when the Mishkan was built, that an oil requires hefshet v'nituach, loishno b'ma gedolah v'loishno b'ma ketana, it'll be across the board. That will be the shita of Rabbi Yochanan. U'ma'asav and Rabbos b'ma gedolah in b'ma ketana lo. Even when those details came out, it only came out related to the main Beis Hamikdash, to the main bama, but not to the personal bamas. Zok to Matanya Kavasid Rabbi Yochanan. The volume should be in b'ma gedolah l'b'ma ketana. Zok to Mishnah, Zok to Brayso says this is a list of items that are differences between the Bama Gedolah and Bama Ketana. Karen, the Bama Gedolah needs Karen, needs the four corners. The Kevish and the ramp. The Yosy and the Yosy. The Revuah, and it has to be exactly square. That's a requirement of the Bama Gedolah. But in Karen, the Yosy, the Kevish, the Revuah, the Bama Ketana. Kiyor v'kanai, v'chitus yadayim v'raglayim. Again, applies to a Bama Gedolah. Then Kiyor v'kanai b'Bama Ketana, as we learned yesterday in the Mishnah. Chazav and Shoik. It goes by a Bama Gedolah, then Chazav Shek with Bama Ketana. That's another thing that we had. The volume shavs to Bama Gedolah and Bama Ketana, and in which ways are they similar? Shchita b'Bama Gedolah uketana. You need shchita by both of them. Havshet v'nituach b'Gedolah uketana, and they both require havshet v'nituach. So you see clearly this brayso says like Rabbi Yochanan that even a Bama Ketana needs havshet v'nituach. And dam matir umefaga. Dam, we make the zrikas dam, it's matter of the carbon, and if you have kavana pigel, you can make the carbon pigel when you're making zrikas dam. B'gedolah uketana sabay abama gedolah and sabay abama ketana. Mumin, an animal with a mumish parcel. Uzman means nicer. Sai b'gedolah and sai b'ketana. So one of the items is hefshet v'nituach. That applies equally to Bama Gedolah and Bama Ketana, just like Rabbi Yochanan said. Gewaltig. Avo, looking into the Bach, Avo Noiser, Avo Hazman, the Noiser, the tummy. Aval azman v'noiser v'tomei shavin b'zeh u'b'zeh. So zman, noiser, and tomei. Zman is pigel. Noiser is noiser, and tomei is tomei. Those are psulim that will apply. Side to Abama Katana, side to Abama Gedola. Tell me about Minayin La'asos Zman B'Abama Katana B'Abama Gedola. How do you know there'll be a problem of pigel by Abama Katana, just like there is by Abama Gedola? Dr. Gemara, I'm not so sure if we're going to this, but we'll read it anyway, because he says that there are those who take it out. I'm not sure. So we'll read it anyway because it's readable. Amar Torah, Lon Yisaref. The Torah tells us that noiser you burn, upigel Yisaref, and pigel you burn. So let's compare them. Ma pigel, pasal b'bama. Just like we know pigel does apply to Abama, aflon, so too the psul of noiser will apply to Abama as well. Or maybe look at it from a different perspective. The Amar Torah, Lon Yisaref. We know that if it becomes noiser, it has to get burned. V'yotze Yisaref. We also know that there's a psul yotze, meaning if a carbon leaves the azara, it's got to be burnt. Ma yotze kasher b'bama. We know there's no psul yotze b'bama because there's no zone around the bama that anything is restricted to. Af lon kasher b'bama. So maybe there'll be no din noiser by a bama either. Why can't we bring a kavachomer from oifei? Oifei. She'ena min posel behen. Mavet oifeish, which don't have a psalmum, right? Remember, an oif is only posel with mechus over. So ma oifeish. She'ena posel behen. She'ena min posel behen. Nevertheless, zman posel behen. There is pigel by a knife. Kochi bamak tana. She'mun posel behen. We know that an animal with a mum cannot be brought on a bamak tana. Eno din shizman posel behen. Surely, pigel should passel by a bamak tana. So that's why you can't make a rifle, my face. Mala'ifais, they have a kula. Shekin ein hazar, I'm sorry, they have a chumrah. The reason why oifais are possible b'bamak tana is because the reason why oifais didn't pigel is because they have a different chumrah. Shekin ein hazar kosher b'hen. Shchita is ksher b'zar, but malika is only kosher by a kohen. Tana b'bamak tana shazar kosher b'ah. We know that you don't need a kohen to do the avodah of the bamak tana. Lo yezman possible. So therefore, maybe there's no psul of pigel. Tamilomer v'zois toras zavach hashlamim lasois to round everything up together. So we're going to hold off on the last line because I think we're going to make a seam together. I think Shaul's going to make a. Shaul usually arranges a seam for. I shouldn't say Shaul makes the seam. Shaul usually arranges a seam. There's many generous people who are mishtatev in the seam. So we should be to finish this Masechta and many more Masechtas. Let's get a quick start on Menachos. It starts off with the same structure as Zevachim. So it will be a very similar start. Zok tehel the Mishnah. Kol haMenachos. The nikmatei shaloi lishma. Right? We know the Zevachim started off with Kol Zevachim. So any mincha that the Kemitah was done shaloi lishman, Rashi says, what's an example of shaloi lishman? The going is not of minchas marcheshes, v'heviyah v'kam takayin, v'yomer areni komet l'shem machvas. So we would call this, what the Gemara referred to as that shinu b'kodesh. You had in mind the wrong carbon, but not the wrong bilam. So right now we're talking about shinu kodesh and not shinu bilam. Kol ha'menachos shenikmitzu shaloi lishman. So you had in mind for the wrong mincha. She'er, they're going to be kosher, meaning your maktir, their koimets, and the shirayim are eaten by the kahanim. The problem is because the bailam said they were going to give a minchas machvas, and they ended up being brought as a minchas marcheshes. As Rashi says, the lo yotzi de nidroi, he wasn't yotzes nether, but tzarech love acheres lo say marcheshes, he still has to bring another korban to fulfill his nether. Chutz mi minchas choyto y minchas kanois, those would be possible. Zot Rashi kagoy nahid the metami miktosh. What's a minchas choyto? It was a mincha of a carbon oil of yored that you would bring, for instance, if you came into the base of mikdash from your tamei. This is the dalos of a carbon oil of yored, or Minchas Kanais, which is the Mincha that the Saita brings. So these comes on Shaloi Lishmon. If the Kmitza was on Shaloi Lishmon, Kaloi L'Shem Nedava, the Kohen made a Kmitza L'Shem Minchas Nedava, or Noisin B'Chliyas HaKoyim Shaloi Lishmon, or if he put the Koyim into the Kli, again L'Shem Nedava, or Holich, or Hikti Shaloi Lishma, any one of these avodas that are critical, that were done Shaloi Lishma, or Chisha B'Achas Me'avodas Halolu, Hareini Ovid L'Shmoi V'Shaloi Lishmoi, or even if he had schizophrenic ideas where he was half Lishmoi, half Shaloi Lishmoi, the halacha is it will be possible. So Nachal Chotu Minchas Chayta Minchas Knois should come to on Shaloi Lishmon, and then Nafem B'Chli, or Nafem B'Chli V'Halach V'Hik B'Shaloi Lishmon, or you did one of the following Shaloi Lishmon, or Lishmon V'Shaloi Lishmon. You started off doing it Lishmoi, and then you switched over to do it not Lishmoi, or Shaloi Lishmon Ulishmon, or you started off with Shaloi Lishmon, then you switched to Lishmon, Psulois, they will all be possible. Rashi explains, Be'elu shtei menachos psulim, in these types of menachos, they'll be possible, because as we said, the other menachos don't have a problem with Shaloi Lishmon. It'll be kosher anyway. These are the ones we're talking about, Minchas Chote and Minchas Knais, the ancient Nechol, and therefore the Shram wouldn't be. The time of Mefarish B'Gemara, the Gemara is going to explain why. The other time, why did we pick an example of not only Lishmoi, but Shaloi Lishmoi, or even Shaloi Lishmoi, but Lishmoi? Why would that be any better? Don't say Dafka if it started off Lishmoi, and then it went to Shaloi Lishmoi, would be possible. Because the fact that it changed to Shaloi Lishmoi, we say that's what he really wants, the toughest Lashon Achrin. But if it was Shaloi Lishmoi v'Lishmoi, if he started off with the wrong machshava and then he switched to Lishmoi, maybe he also go back to the final machshava and it should be kosher. Kamash Malan, that either way it will be possible. That b'chilas deverev adam nitfas Islam. We hold that every part of what he said counts. So say if there was a Shaloi Lishmoi at the beginning or at the end, it would still possible. Keita Lishmon v'Shaloi Lishmon. What would be an example? Either L'Shem Minchas Chote or L'Shem Minchas Nedava. So he had, during the Kmitza, he had a kavanah that would be L'Shem Minchas Chote, and then in the middle, he said, no, L'Shem Minchas Nedava. Or Shaloi Lishmon v'Lishmon, L'Shem Minchas Nedava, or L'Shem Minchas Chote. Again, Zok the Mishnah is not possible. Correct the Gemara, Lama Li Lemisna, Ella. Why did it say Ella? What should it have said? Kol HaRamach HaShenech to Shaloi Lishmon, Ksheres, V'lei Alu L'Baylam L'Shem Chayva. What's the Ella? Listening, V'lei Alu L'Baylam L'Shem Chayva. What is this extra expression of Ella? And Mashma, the Rashi, Midikatani Ella, Mashma, the Chol Dina, Kemincha Ksheira, Ella Zabavad. It means that in every other way, it's a regular good mincha. The only issue there is Shaloi Alu L'Baylam L'Shem Chayva. Hakamash Malam, L'Baylam Hu D'Loi Alu L'Shem Chayva. A mincha gufa ksheira, the bayim taka don't get their ritzui, they didn't fulfill their nether. But the mincha is ksheira. What does it mean it's ksheira? It means moving forward as you're continuing to process this mincha, you have to go back to the proper rules. But also the even moving forward, you can't say, okay, once it was Shaloi Lishma, so we can do the rest of it Shaloi Lishma. No, you got to go back to the original kavanah. As Rashi says, you're not allowed to be mishav anything else. So if you were doing a mechas machvas and you made kmitza and you had kavanah for mechas marcheshes, okay, you did what you did. Now, when you were going to continue to put that kmitza into a keli and bring it to the mizbeach, you have to go back to the right kavanah of a mechas machvas. You can't say, okay, once I switch to marcheshes, I'll stick with it. No, don't get into more trouble than you already are. To the Rava, and this was taught to us by Rava, the Yom Rava, Ola Sheshach the Shaloi Lishma, also Nizak Dama Shaloi Lishma. Just because you did one thing wrong, it doesn't mean you need to continue doing things wrong. Iba Yisem Svara, Iba Yisem Kra. This halach of Rava is a Svara, but it's also a pasuk. Iba Yisem Svara, Mishum de Mishani Ba Kol Hani Lishni Rava Nezel. Because you made one mistake, you should double down on your mistake. That's the Svara that says, well, you should go back to doing it properly. The pasuk says, Tishmar, you have to keep whatever you say. And you should do the neder that you made, nedava. What do you mean nedava? It shows that neder. Nedava, neder. Zok Gemara, Kori le neder, the Kori le nedava. Why is the Torah referring to the same promise with both a neder and a nedava? The Torah is to teach us something. If you were makar of your carbon as you were supposed to, so you were makar of your minchas machvas as a minchas machvas, neder. It will fulfill the requirement of the prior neder that you made. Vimlav, if you did it shalei shma, nedava, we look at it like it's a brand new carbon, a brand new nedava. Nevertheless, nedava mi shari l'shnuiva, you're not allowed to change the nedava either. So therefore, this minchas machvas became now a nedava. Just because it's the nedava, that doesn't mean you're allowed to change the kavava. So the Torah is telling us that it becomes a nedava, but you still have to do it with the proper kavana. Okay, let's stop here. We'll be tomorrow.